Yes. That's always the difficulty, isn't it? Yes.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be outstanding before the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Formley.
Hello, welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Mumarimana people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 9th of October 2023. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies. I see we have a full house tonight, so there are none. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associate. Are there any declarations from councillors? There being none, we're now heading to our omnibus items. The first one, 4.1, being the confirmation of the minutes. That the minutes of the council meeting held on the 18th of September 2023 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, I now move on to Mayor's Communications 4.2. And I table correspondence from the Honourable Nick Street MP, Minister for Stadium and Events, in response to the letter from the Lord Mayor, Mayors Paula Reid, Beck Thomas and myself regarding consultation with the Greater Hobart Councils about an AFL training administration facility, and our letter to the Minister is also tabled. Thank you, CEO. I now move on to the Mayor's diary entries from the 19th of September to the 9th of October today for myself, also for the Deputy Mayor and Councillors Chong, Goyne and Kennedy representing me at different events in southern Tasmania. 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Now move on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. First one being the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker, anything to report? Thank you. The Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority. Councillor Warren. Thank you. And there's nothing with regards to Tas Water or the Greater Hobart Committee. Colleagues, are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll table the minutes from the Richmond Advisory Committee and also the working group for the Richmond Bicentennial.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Chong. Colleagues, there being no others, we've moved now on to 4.6, the weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 18th and the 25th of September, as well as the 2nd of October 2023, have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the weekly briefing report of the 25th of September and seek guidance from yourself or the officer concerned, and that is with regard to community consultation on parking sensor public data provision. It refers to, in the last paragraph, community consultation will commence during the week beginning the 2nd of October and be available for 4 weeks. I just seek clarification as to whether this went through council in order for this to actually proceed to public consultation. I may have missed it. I have attended most of the workshops, but nevertheless I may have missed this. So my question is, has this been certified by council in order to go out to public consultation in accordance with a lot of other issues that this place actually puts to the public?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, this was a consultation undertaken in accordance with a project plan, and from that point of view it was not brought back to council because it's pretty much run-of-the-mill what we would normally do as part of a project. Mr Graham may have some other details.
Thank you, Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor, our council workshop was held on this item to explain to council and council gave direction to proceed with the community. consultation.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Jones.
Supplementary, yes, look, thank you, Mr Graham, for that, because it seems to raise a matter in relation to what the workshop basically can do as far as make a decision in relation to public consultation. So, again, my question is that, is this the first that we've ever had in relation to a public consultation matter that has, in fact, been basically approved by a straw poll at a workshop, as distinct from coming to council for deliberation?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. As you would be aware, Councillor James, workshops aren't an opportunity for decision making. They're for advice and information. So that information has been provided to council as part of a workshop. The project, the consultation, the other critical elements of that project were discussed, and it was effectively a business as usual type approach for us.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, in relation to the public approaching the elected members in this place, then we are basically on notice of basically supporting this, and therefore do we have the opportunity to defend it as part of what would have been a normal council matter, in my opinion, as part of the decision-making process.
CEO.
Thank you. In terms of defending it, this is a project that's been through budget processes and other workshop processes, so councillors have been provided with a lot of information in terms of this project over a period of a couple of years. So from that point of view, our understanding was that councillors were familiar with the project in terms of its scope and aims. So there shouldn't be any particular controversy associated with discussing that with anyone who raises a question. And as we always do, if you find yourself in a situation where you need some more information, we are here to assist.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other matters arising from the weekly briefing reports? There being none, I note that we're at the end of our Omnibus items. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Second to Councillor Chong. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving now on to item 5, public question time. There are no public questions on notice, nor are there any answers. Answers to previous questions taken on notice, there are none. We now move on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? There being none, we move now on to item 6, which is deputations by members of the public. Members of the public making a deputation are reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes, and a timer will sound at the end of that time. And I do have to enforce that rule, so please, only 3 minutes. CEO, do we have any deputations this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 5 deputations this evening. The first of those deputations is from Dr. Jane Sargison in respect to the development application for 1089 and 1099 South Arm Road.
Thank you, Dr. Sargison. If you could please state your name and suburb, that would be appreciated.
I wanted to speak in relation to the development application that's before you this evening. Just give you a little bit of context. The development application is recommended by a council officer for refusal on the basis of noise, and that is the only condition that has triggered that refusal. To give you some context here, this particular property of 34 hectares is no longer viable for farming due to the size and access to water. It was rezoned to rural living in recognition of the presence of the quarry that's adjacent to the site, which is the source of noise that has been attributed in this situation. The quarry only operates during the daytime. There's no blasting on site. It is just purely grinding equipment and the movement of machinery on site. The quarry itself is actually already ring-fenced on 2 sides by existing subdivisions. They have land that has recently been subdivided, and there are houses that have been built on those properties. What we're looking to do here, as you'll see from the plans that are provided in your documentation tonight, is a 14-lot subdivision of the 34 hectares of the balance of the site, and only one boundary of that is bounds to the quarry. For your consideration, EPA had provided some information to council officers regarding noise. An addendum to the noise consultant's report was provided to council. Unfortunately, that seems not to have been provided in your papers today. But the council, the additional information that was provided outlined that the presence of a noise barrier, which was listed in the council officer's report, would have no discernible difference to the noise level on site. The noise that we're talking about is between 45 and 50 decibels. So we're talking about something of the order of a refrigerator noise at 50 decibels and quiet conversation at 45 decibels. Just for context for you, 50 decibels is a limit that's normally used in noise attenuation reports in relation to highway noise and the like. The addendum report that was provided by the noise consultant and has been discussed with EPA. EPA is on view in agreement that the noise amenity in relation to noise for future residents of the subdivision can be addressed through the building design, so provision of double glazed windows and insulation in the walls. So my deputation to you today is for councillors to consider an alternative to recommend this subdivision for approval on the basis that there is
Thank you, Dr. Hutchison.
properties nearby. Thank you.
Thank you very much. CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Mr Steve Clark in relation to the same development application.
Thank you. Mayor Blomley and councillors, I refer to the planning permit application 36283 at 1089 South Arm Road, Sandford. My submission is without prejudice. In principle, I have no objection to the planned subdivision by the Moresby family, but I have an objection in the extreme at the possible discontinuance of the Sandford Fire Brigade, which is a critical community asset. My name is Steve Clark, and I'm third officer at the Sandford Fire Brigade. Coincidentally, the fire station was initially formed by mostly Moresby family residents, with the current station being opened in 1985. It has since played a vital role in protection of Sandford and the surrounding residents from both vegetation and structure, road crash rescue, technical rescues, community consultation and involvement in community education, fuel reduction burns for residents, assist ambulance and assist TAS police. It appears the proposal which was provided for public consultation was ambiguous. Whether the fire station stays or is removed is unclear in the documents provided. I understand the council and or the developer can alter the current planning to include the continuance of the Sandford Fire Brigade on this site. The Sandford area protected by the brigade is some 87 square kilometres, which is by far the biggest in the Hobart District Division. The proposed subdivision will further increase the current population, which will be over 2,000 people. What does the Sandford Fire Brigade do? The Sandford Fire Station is operational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is manned by a highly trained group of volunteers, 16 male and female, of which 75% have full-time jobs and 4 being retired and working at home. Brigade members train every Monday night, regularly gain further skills with training at the Tasmanian Fire Service, and the training involves a curriculum of some 25 subjects. Brigade members volunteer for interstate and intrastate deployment as required. Each brigade member is provided with personal protective equipment and a corporate uniform which costs over $3,000. The Sandford station houses a fire appliance known as a 3-1. The 3-1 is a 15-tonne, 4-wheel drive heavy tanker with 3,000 litre water capacity and foam making capability. The truck features seating for 5 crew, modern communications. The appliance is the only heavy tanker south of Rokeby and west of Cambridge. The unfortunate side of deployment for us is road crash rescue. The brigade is first responders generally having to support casualties for up to 20 minutes prior to the arrival of paramedics. The brigade regularly attends incidents outside the area.
Thank you, Mr Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our third deputation tonight is Mr Sam Morse in respect to the development application for 981 Cambridge Road.
Good evening. I'd like to outline the reasons behind the density variation that we're seeking for 981 Cambridge Road. We're proposing a minor variation of just half a dwelling, totalling 9 dwellings compared to the permitted density of 8.5 for the site. The variation is crucial for several reasons. First and foremost, it promotes affordability for public housing, reducing homelessness and improving overall health outcomes due to the fact that 4 of the 9 dwellings are to be operated by a housing provider. Importantly, our site is strategically located within an 80-metre walking distance from local business zone land, public transport, health services. It perfectly meets the criteria for higher density development and aligns with the broader goals of sustainable urban planning. I'd like to also share the insights from our town planner regarding this matter and a comparable case recently approved. In this case, the proposed 4 of the 9 dwellings are to be operated by a housing provider as community housing, will provide an invaluable and significant benefit to the lives of at least 4 householders that have been forced out of the private housing market. In my opinion, this proposal will indeed provide a significant benefit that is important and of consequence, particularly when weighted against the small extent of the discretion sought, 9 dwellings compared to the permitted density of 8.5. There is a discretion in the planning scheme that allows for such a variation to take place. A recent example of this matter of inner location versus general residential zone in Hobart, it can be noted that this proposal involves a significantly lower density of 308 square metres per dwelling compared to the 84 square metres on the other side. TASCAT proposal was for 22 dwellings on 1,849 square metre site, a proposed density of 1 dwelling per 84 square metres compared to the permitted density of 1 per 200 square metres in the inner residential zone. This was 2.38 times denser than the permitted density of 1 per 200 square metres. This proposed site is for 9 dwellings on 2,777 square metres, or the site total is 3,053 square metres, including the access strip. The site area per dwelling is 308 square metres, compared to the permitted density of 325 in the general residential zone. This is only 1.05 times denser than the permitted density. We have provided TASCAT precedent as context to how the significant community benefit test was determined. The principles of the decision are relevant for both the inner residential zone and the general residential zone because of a similar significant community benefit test, and that is provided in both zones. In conclusion, our proposal represents a conscientious response to past concerns and a proactive step towards a more inclusive and supportive community. We believe that by granting this minor density variation, we can make a substantial positive impact on the lives of many.
Thank you, Mr Morse.
Right on the clock.
CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our fourth deputation tonight is from Mr Roger Curtis in respect to the AFL High Performance Centre proposal.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you. Some of you will know of me as a result of my 40-year involvement as a volunteer with the Clarence Football Club, the last 18 years of which has been as a life member. But I don't claim to have any greater connection nor love of the Eastern Shore or this great city of potential than any of you. But it is a connection. And it's a connection forged over more than a quarter of a century from living here. Firstly, from childhood at Beachside Kinder, then at Harrow Primary School, roaming the hills of Tranmere and Druthi Point, delivering the Saturday Evening Mercury. That'll test some of you. With the chocolate box strapped to my side to hundreds of households on the Eastern Shore. Right through to owning my first VW as an impoverished university student with borrowed golf clubs, which enabled me, particularly in the summer, to drive to Rosny Golf Course, and if I got there early enough, well, mostly I paid, but the penalty was that if the sprinklers didn't get you, the plovers would. What is the relevance of all that, you might ask? It's this. When I urge you to support a public consultation process as a component of considering options for the Rosny Golf Course site and other options to be the home of the Training Administration Centre for our AFL club, I do so not on behalf of the AFL or on behalf of the government, but as someone who is of this place. And through that lens, I say this: if allowed to be done right, this $60 million project with all its features will be the signature development for the city of Clarence for generations. It will open up endless possibilities for every sector of the community, especially if at Rosny. May I end on this note. For councillors, the motivation to be on council certainly is not money, nor ego. Rather, it's a desire to play a role in enriching the lives of the community you represent. And when the right opportunity comes along to do just that through appropriate development, I'd urge you to do so.
Thank you, Mr Curtis.
Thank you.
CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our final deputation for tonight is from Mr Chris Dare in respect to the AFL High Performance Centre.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for affording me a few minutes tonight to talk on behalf of the AFL Club. By way of background, I've been involved in the development of training admin facilities for sports sector for over 20 years. My experience spans sports from the AFL to the NRL to soccer, cricket and golf. Most of these projects are all about working with an established club or organisation where the community footprint is known or a given. And this is where this opportunity in front of you tonight is different. It's about creating a facility and a community footprint from scratch and ensuring those values will be embedded into the club's culture as it grows over the years to come. Be it via community programs that would operate from the facilities using the players and the club as an attractor. Programs that touch all facets of the community, including, for example, the homeless at Collingwood, those struggling for mental health at St Kilda and Fremantle, the disadvantaged through the Crows or Bulldogs, the Indigenous at Richmond and the Giants, cultural diversity and inclusion at the Kangaroos, the Giants and the Power, domestic violence at Carlton and Geelong, or school-aged children across pretty much every club. Albeit by the little-known fact that across all of the AFL clubs across the country, most of their training facilities are open to the public. You only had to be at the recent grand final week preparations for both Collingwood and Brisbane to see how 1 minute kids are on the ground kicking a footy with their mum or dad, the players come on, the kids have moved off, the training session goes on, and immediately after that, that field again becomes a community asset for a kick to kick. Albeit via access to the cafes, sports medicine clinics or function spaces that are typically embedded within these facilities. When done right, these facilities are open and inclusive facilities that strengthen the connection between the clubs, their supporters and the community more generally. And for our new Tasmanian AFL club, maximising this connection to the community will be more important than any other club. I've been fortunate enough to see the power of these facilities and their impact on young children in particular, be it the boys and girls who were spellbound when the Geelong players dropped by to see and get talked to around a Cyber Cats program, which is all about cyberbullying, to the young girl that I met recently, shortly after the opening of the home of the Matildas, where all she wanted to do was see Sam Kerr, The sight on her face when she turned up and saw Sam Kerr training is something that will remain with me for a while. Her beaming smile just said it all. I asked her mother how the impact of the visit was, and she said, "It's the best day of my daughter's life, and I hope it'll inspire her to train harder in the hope that one day she'll become a Matilda herself." These facilities deliver more than just social benefits, they also generate economic impact, from the construction period to the 100 or so people that will work in them, to the players shopping in the shopping centres, to buy their clothes and so forth. So the opportunity exists for this council to capture all that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Dare. Thank you. Well, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, that now concludes our deputations. Item number 6. We move now on to item number 7, Planning Authority matters. The council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1, development application for 981 Cambridge Road, Cambridge. 9 multiple dwellings, 1 existing and 8 new. I understand there's alternate motion. Councillor Mulder?
Oh, yes, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Mulder's motion? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Mulder.
Oh, Mr Mayor, as a procedural thing, I was quite happy to let the officer's recommendation go, but since you've given me the floor. This is a development application relating to that we've dealt with before. And the reason for refusal the last time, there were 3 reasons. 2 of those reasons were addressed, but we now have it down to 1 reason, which is substantial community benefit. The community benefit to be derived from this is that there are social housing components. And the actual open size is the actual lot size is the issue where the performance criteria must be met. There are 2 performance criteria in this particular area, and only one of them needs to be satisfied. It's an or situation, not an and situation. And the or situation, I think, is thoroughly developed, and I thank the deputation from Mr Morse because that sums it up in a thing. The previous refusals in terms of social benefit were based on an old planning tribunal decision, or in these days known as TASCAT, and yet there is a recent one. As recently as May, there was a development which was highlighted, there was a substantial reduction. And the difference between the 2 decisions is that at the time of the original decision, there wasn't a social housing element and there wasn't a housing short crisis, particularly a social housing crisis. As a result, when the housing crisis hits it post-COVID and the construction costs are going through the roof, we now have a new decision based on new circumstances, which is the one that's related to that I advised you all of and provided a copy with. The important thing with this is that there are sufficient social services in the area. There are medical supplies, there are shops, there's the signature Cambridge Park development area, and it's affected by regular public transport these days. So the reasons for this come on, and we've got to take a step back. We've got to have a listen to what's going on in the housing crisis throughout the country. The federal government, the state government, they're all talking about we need to get greater densities. We've just had the situation with Skylands, where there's a proposal completely out of the blue, well out from anywhere else. The government is adamant that we're going to have to change the density rules for that particular development. Yet here we are with a scheme that is quite clearly lagging behind the crisis that we face in social housing today. All I can say is that these are solid grounds, they are developed, they are based on precedents, and precedents that are the precedent that is more closely connected with the situation we find ourselves in today. So all I can say is that I have every confidence that should council not approve this, I have every confidence that TASCAT will apply their most recent decision and grant this in the context of a crisis in social housing. And if you may note that the latest version, as late as this afternoon, we finally developed a thing where there is an obligation for a social housing network. We're not just taking the developer's words for this.
There's now a condition of the planning permit that at least 4 of those units will go into social housing in perpetuity. This isn't a flipper. This is a genuine condition of this permit. I just ask council to support.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, maybe yes, because I've stood up. I'd just like to thank Councillor Moulder for actually giving quite a compelling case there for us to consider his alternate motion. I thank you for doing the work on it, and I'm interested to hear colleagues' thoughts around the table.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to contribute? Councillor James. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And from the outset, may I say that if there had been 8 dwellings, as distinct from what's being proposed by the developer, I would have been the first, I think, to jump to my feet and support the recommendation, which I believe would have been a recommendation from the officer staff in this place. In fact, what it does cover in the officer's report, and I quote, "The proposed density of 308 square metres per dwelling is significantly higher than the average density of the surrounding area." And they quote a case in which the Clarence City Council versus M. Jury was one of the determining factors at that time, which was set in print that the proposed density would be greater than any other multiple dwelling development within the surrounding area. Now, the motion that's before the chair and what has been put forward by Councillor Moulder, and he refers to, amongst other things, the fact that it's the proposal, in his words, provides for a significant social and community benefit. But reading the officer's report, what they are saying is that, in fact, there is this density of 308 square metres, which is significantly higher than the average density in the area concerned. So those two go cap in hand. So you can talk about how it's going to provide affordable housing and how it's going to be important as part of this density requirement. But at the end of the day, we have had cases in the tribunal and TASCAT which has basically come out in favour of the fact that there needs to be a look at the average area of development and then divide that by the number of dwellings to come up with a particular square metre of what the dwelling is significantly either over or under. And in this particular case, the proposed density of 308 square metres is higher than in the other areas associated with any other development. So, Mr Mayor, if in fact this motion is unsuccessful, then I will move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I mean, similar to Councillor James, I was initially considering supporting the officer's recommendation, but I just want to, before I give my decision and reasons for it, I just wanted to ask a question through you as to whether the condition to provide for units that are managed by an accredited community housing provider is enforceable.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. See Ms Shea or Ms Olsen? Ms Olsen, are you able to provide an answer, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor. We certainly can enforce the provision of a Part 5 agreement, so before we proceed, so that is enforceable.
Thank you, Ms Olsen.
I thank Ms Olsen for her answer. So in that case, the argument in the officer's report is all about this question of you have an acceptable solution, which is the density. And I note that Mr Mawson, his deputation, referred to the small extent of the variation, but as we know from the Henry design decision, you cannot use the acceptable solution as a benchmark when you're considering the performance criteria. However, having said that, the argument is that in the performance criteria, then considering whether something is of a significant social or community benefit, there are previous tribunal decisions that basically say it's not enough to just say, well, you're providing housing and that's needed, it's going to help house prices, it's going to provide rates, etc. But there is an argument to say that if you provide social housing, there is a significant social or community benefit. The fact that we have this condition, that the condition is enforceable, I believe that the significant benefit, therefore, is there. And so as such, and I congratulate Councillor Mulder on the work he's done on this. We know that when we have a recommendation for refusal, if we can provide a condition that makes the development compliant, as long as it's not my understanding is it's not a significant variation from the original proposal, then we can actually approve a development with that condition. If the change is not significant and it makes the proposal compliant. So I congratulate Councillor Mulder for his work on this, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an interesting one, as so many that come before us are. And in fact, I have to say I think that Councillor Mulder has undersold the effort that's been put in by the proponent, because I believe it was 5 conditions upon which they were refused last time, not 3. And indeed, we're now down to 1. So in fact, I congratulate the proponent on the efforts that they've undertaken to whittle those all down. It's been quite a significant undertaking to come back to council to address all of those substantial issues that were on the table previously, and get them back down to the one issue which was number 1 last time and continues to remain. Quite appropriately, I think that the officers have put forward the recommendation that they felt appropriate in respect to this one outstanding issue, because it really is something that requires councillors to deliberate and weigh up on balance where we stand here in respect of those. It really boils down to the tribunal decisions and the definitions of significant benefit, and interceding into that social and community housing, and the value that that's being placed on by the tribunal. And as Councillor Hume has said, it is those more recent developments around the interpretations of significant benefit that have enabled me to overcome the concerns that I had, that in terms of this particular provision being able to be overcome, and quite frankly having enough strength to be able to stand up in the tribunal at a later time. So that's really what it boils down to. Do we think this is going to have the gravitas to be able to stand up to an argument? Yes, I think it does. And I'm very particular about the interpretation. It's, I've wrestled with it a lot. I've given it a lot of consideration and looked at those decisions. So I've rested in a place where I'm quite comfortable to support the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Mulder, particularly on the strength of the enforceability of the new permit condition. So I think that's very important consideration for colleagues to consider. And for that reason, I'll be supporting the alternate motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Chong, thank you.
A question, I think, really, rather than a statement. I know we've had some issues with Part 5 agreements before with some of the big subdivisions where they're ended in at the beginning, but once a property is sold, they're then no longer apparently enforceable. Now, I don't know whether that's just practice or whether that's actually the legal definition.
I might ask Ms Shea to address that, please. Thank you, Ms Shea.
Mr Mayor, when a Part 5 is applied to what we call the parent title, when that parent title is subdivided into individual lots, the Part 5 then goes on to each individual lot, so we'll apply all the way through those titles.
Thank you, Ms Shea. Thank you, Councillor Chong. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Things you might have said in 2007. Collateral debt obligations seem like a good investment. They're hedging the risk. Kevin Rudd's going really well. He's going to probably be Prime Minister for a decade. And no ifs, no buts, 2,777 metres squared is a maximum of 7 dwellings. The old scheme that came into effect in 2007 and was with us for some time had a no ifs, no buts limit of 7. So things have tilted and have eased in the space in the direction of development, as this is now been eased so it is comfortably 8. So the density does matter, and whilst in this case you might be saying we're looking at it through a social housing lens, as other applications come before us, they won't be looked at necessarily with that background. The core problem comes down to the fact that the scheme has a real dearth of inner residential zoned land, and that is what we need, and that is where we want to put density, and the whole point of the inner residential zone allows for density very in close proximity to services. And this is what I have to weigh up in this case, because there are some meritorial factors underlying why we should entertain a change. However, Cambridge is a marvellous place and a great school that people will move heaven and earth to get their kids into, but it's also, I think if we're doing a flyover, it's on our suburban fringe. After Cambridge, you have the highway through and out towards Sorrel, and yes, you can turn one direction to go to 7 Mile Beach, but that in that area is where the suburban fringe finishes, and I don't know that it is actually located next to the range of services that is intended with this criteria. I think this is intended for use where there is a lot of services in close proximity to people that may require more services. So it's not with comfort or with joy that I stand to not support this alternate, but that is where I find myself in. And again, the density provisions were significantly eased, and the density decisions are of significant weight bearing, which is probably why our planning officers have not changed their view in light of any new and recent cases and in light of any advancements that have been put to us today.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I too have concerns about the density and the setting of a precedent. And I don't know this area particularly well. I know there's a chip shop on the corner, a couple of houses along. I think Cambridge Park is a fair way away if you're walking. I'm not aware of there being a medical facility or anything other than a high-end grocery shop there. It's homewares, but I don't think it's a standard, sort of Glebe Hill Village type shopping centre. I think the deputation listed social housing as the number one concern, or priority, I should say, and my point would be that the social housing benefit of 8 dwellings is exactly the same as the social benefit of 9 dwellings, 4 in each. Could have applied for 8, passed straight away, no problems. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Mulder, one reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks, colleagues, for your contributions. I'll just have a... The fact is that acceptable solutions is 8. If that had met the 8, we wouldn't even be talking about it. It would be deemed as of right. So now it's come now. But we all know that acceptable solutions, you have to apply performance criteria if they're not met. Now, I'm a great believer in the old here's the minimum, here's the maximum, and there's a range in between, but that's not the planning scheme we have today. Might I say, we don't have the 2007 planning scheme, and neither do it, the last time I checked, do we have Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister of Australia. So I start to question the relevance of that contribution. What I will say is this much, is that the trajectory we're heading on, and if the Skylands proposal was anything to go by, this area in Cambridge does have the services. This has a medical service, a full-blown medical practice just down the road. It has a high-end supermarket, sure it does. It has, it used to have a hotel. And there's now an interesting point, isn't it? The density of housing on that hotel site nowhere meets the requirement of the general residential zone. But it's approved because of that little quirk under our new planning scheme that allows a much higher density on commercial premises. Now, if you want to talk about distance from services, you have a look at how far it is from the Cambridge Hotel to the Cambridge Park, the old Horseshoe into the Cambridge Park. Now, there's a distance from services. You want to talk about distance from services, just have a look at what Skylands is going to propose. They're not services. That's real distance from services. And here we have something locked in a tourist heartland within a stone's throw from the airport and all the traffic that produces. All the services are actually there, the medical services, and the only thing that's missing is a service TAS shop, I suppose, but then very few suburbs have them. So really, it's a question, right, of here is a particular development. Now, the reason it's 8 and not 9 is because if it went to 8, then we could not afford and we could not produce the 4 social housing units. And if we went to 8, there would be no requirement whatsoever to produce those social housing units. So for heaven's sake, for the people who are in desperate need of the social housing, for all the benefits that social housing provides in a smaller community rather than stuck in the middle of the city and all the problems that produces, just think about a decentralised city. The more that we put people and services out, the less we have with traffic problems on the Tasman Bridge, because we're creating employment, we're creating construction. So please, let's apply some common sense.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Colleagues, I'll put the alternate motion, which is for approval, seeing in the name of Councillor Moulder, for 981 Cambridge Road, Cambridge, for 9 multiple dwellings. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Colleagues, I now move on to item 7.2, which is development application for 20 Lelli Road, Lindisfarne, partial change of use to food services wholesale bakery. I call for a mover, please, of the motion. Thank you, Councillor Chong. Second, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you, Councillor Chong.
The officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Colleagues wishing to speak on this one? There being none, there's probably no need for a vote of reply. I'll put the motion, which is the officer's recommendation for approval. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving now, colleagues, on to item 7.3, which is development application for 249 Carella Street, Howrah, additions and alterations for a single dwelling. I understand there's alternate motion, Councillor James?
I'll wait for the mover.
Okay, all right. So is there a mover for the officer's recommendation? Being none, Councillor James, do you have a thought on this?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to give a bit of time to that. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have circulated an alternative motion, and also I'd like to incorporate an addition to that, and believe I'll read that out, and it's my apologies for having this last condition at the last
Before
moment.
you proceed, Councillor James, there has been circular. I appreciate it's not with the addition, but is there a seconder for this alternate motion? Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor James, please proceed.
Yes, Mr Mayor. So the motion is, as has been circulated, the development application for addition and alterations at 249 Carella Road, Howrah, be refused for the following reasons. The proposal is contrary to performance criteria 8.4.2p3, as there is a reduction in the sunlight to a habitable room of a dwelling on an adjoining property to the south of Carella Street, Howrah. Also, the proposal is contrary to performance criteria 8.4.2p3, Roman numeral 2, as the adjoining property to the south is most affected by overshadowing of the private open space. And also this condition that the siting and scale of a dwelling must not cause any unreasonable loss of amenity to the adjoining properties, having regard to the visual impact caused by the apparent scale, bulk or proportions of the dwelling when viewed from an adjoining lot. Mr Mayor, I went through the detail on that because I know a number of my colleagues have been there and have in fact been privy to the impact that what this will have on that property in particular to the south, and that's of access from Carella Street, Howrah. There's also the siting and scale of the proposed development will cause unreasonable loss of amenity. Now, amenity has a broad brush definition, and that does incorporate the extent to which the reduction in sunlight, and that is an aspect of amenity, together with the overshadowing that is quite concerning in relation to the property to the south, and there's also some impact on a property to the west. This is really a significant change, in my opinion, to where the performance criteria have been able to sort of disassociate itself from a portion of sunlight that in fact will be lost at the 21st of June, and that is basically being brought out in the performance criteria. So I've actually picked those acceptable solutions, and I know that those who have been to the property and have cited it, that in fact this will in fact be detrimental to the property because of the loss of amenity and for the reasons I just mentioned. I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor, I could just confirm you're happy with that amendment to the alternate motion. That Councillor Gray. Thank you. And a seconder, please. Thank you.
Just briefly, a lot of us have been to the property and we've seen the scale of the impact that this is going to have on the neighbour adjacent. I would like those of you who are considering not accepting the alternative motion on the grounds that there is the stipulation of excluding bedrooms, to consider that the resident in question had been considering switching so that that was a study. And it feels completely arbitrary to me that the room which has been used for study purposes, because it's labelled bedroom, the overshadowing would not be taken into account, but if it had been labelled study, it would be taken into account. So I think this is an instance where we can maybe apply a bit of common sense in terms of the impact on the neighbour.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you for bringing this alternative. Sunlight is so important for mental health in Mental Health Week. It's worth drawing attention to that. Blocking all that sunlight, regardless of what the room is used for, but I do thank Councillor Darko for that contribution of the flexibility of floor plans. If you lose your sunlight, your electricity bills automatically go up because you're having increased lighting and increased heating. And yet, this development also prohibits or precludes the neighbour from putting up solar panels because there's now not going to be any opportunity to have solar power. So to me that seems really rude. I would certainly encourage my colleagues to think about whether there could be a better result on this than approving the original plan.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think a lot of what's been highlighted in some of the contributions of colleagues is some deficiencies in the way that the planning scheme is constructed, in that you have solar panels on a roof and you have a condition that protects them, but it doesn't protect possible future solar panels. You have a room that's a bedroom, but if it was something else, then it would be considered a habitable room that's not other than a bedroom, and therefore the overshadowing would be taken into consideration. So, yes, those are some issues with the scheme, and yes, I believe the scheme is deficient. However, in assessing an application, we have to look at the scheme as it is and not how we would like it to be. And the fact is that the room that is, and you could argue unreasonably overshadowed, is a bedroom and therefore is not captured by that particular clause of the scheme. And no, there are no solar panels there. And in terms of the overshadowing of private open space, look, you might consider the overshadowing to be unreasonable, but through tribunal decisions, that particular clause has been given greater definition than it has in the scheme itself, which is that as I recall, it's for a period of 3 hours. You have less than 50% of that private open space overshadowed. So the officers have looked at this in great detail and have applied not only the provisions of the planning scheme but also those provisions in the way they've been given definition through past tribunal decisions. Look, I can understand that we may like the scheme to be otherwise, but in terms of how the scheme is worded, plus the definitions being given by those tribunal decisions, I don't believe that this development is incompatible with the scheme. I believe it is actually compliant. I was a bit slow in jumping to support or to move the officer's recommendation, but I will foreshadow it should this motion fail.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Richard, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a difficult question as well, and for those of us who've also who have taken the time to go and visit, definitely a detrimental effect will result for the adjoining property, and particularly the property that I'm sure most of the councillors that attended the site were able to see. Issues around sunlight, future capacity for solar, which is in the planning, in the pipeline for that particular household. Unfortunately, none of those things are able to be taken into consideration in the officer's report, and without particular flexibility for us to actually look at them. Hence, when I had a look at it, and as per my communication to colleagues earlier this afternoon, my hope was that, in fact, separate to the issues that were raised in the original alternate motion, that we looked at clause 8.4.2, performance criteria 3A4, in relation to the siting and the scale of the dwelling, which must not cause an unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties having regard to visual impacts caused by the apparent scale, bulk and proportions of the dwelling when viewed from an adjoining lot, which of course is exactly the house next door that we're talking about. So in my view, there's more legs, if you like, to actually focus on that particular provision, and the interpretation that the officers have placed on that is where I see that there is some scope for consideration around a refusal. I don't think there's a lot of strength in the initial two, as valid as they might be. In terms of the planning scheme, I think that the strength is missing from those two. I think there's a more arguable point around that particular provision. And so for that reason, that's where my mind's at. So I'll be interested to hear in the summing up around the capacity for that to withhold scrutiny on appeal. So that's for me where the possibility of something having strength in the tribunal lies, and the other two, unfortunately, as valid as they are, would probably not hold up on their own. So hence the injection of that other point later this afternoon. But I'll be continue to be interested to hear what colleagues have to say.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor James, waving the flag, please.
I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. So item 7.3, which alternate motion seconding in the name of Councillor James, and that is for refusal. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Moving now on to development application for 189 to 1099 South Arm Road, Sandford, a 14-lot subdivision boundary adjustment, including public road and public open space lots. It's recommended for refusal. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor James. Seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Thank you, Councillor James.
Yes, look, Mr Mayor, I noted with interest the Speaker in relation to the South Arm Fire Brigade, and I know that we have had correspondence in relation to that. and there's some uncertainty in relation to that matter, and of course it would hinge upon what decision we make in relation to that, and that is why the recommendation that the staff have put forward is a good one, because some years ago in this place we did discuss the location of the quarry, and it did in fact divide the council at the time in relation to that, because a quarry operation within the vicinity of a development has enormous consequences as part and parcel of any development. Okay, there is a fence around two sides of it, and the hours of operation of the quarry have been spelt out in relation to that this evening. But at the end of the day, the simple fact of the matter is that the officers have gone into great detail, and that is why they have referred to clause C961 P1A, and that is an interesting clause because it does deal with extractive industry. And that really is what is driving this particular matter. And in my opinion, and from reading the officer's report, it hinges on this extractive industry, which has caused a lot of angst in this place over the years. And we don't usually have this sort of thing coming to the fore. Some years ago, we had the Flagstaff Gully Quarry and the buffer zone that is in place even to this day as far as development, what can occur within that particular area of Flagstaff Gully. And also too, the officers have spelt out in great detail the impact that this extractive industry will have, and it cannot necessarily safeguard any of those persons, or even if the proposal goes ahead, that there is no particular buffer zone, and that is actually one of the key criteria in which the officers have made that point as far as a sensitive future use of the area is being impacted upon by the existing activity of an extractive quarry, which is an operation. It operates. Okay, its hours may be limited, but at the end of the day, those hours of operation still pose, in my opinion, and I think the officers have really tapped it on the head here because of the nature of where this is being located. There is another opportunity, and perhaps the scale and size of this development could be enhanced by the reduction in the number of lots. But in this particular case, it has been quite forthright by the proponents to be able to say we want this sort of development to occur. I seek council support in relation to the officer's recommendation because it's a key matter in relation to this, and there is room for another proposal to come forward which may set it back further from within that periphery of the quarry, and that may then meet the, I believe, the officer's requirements for some subdivision to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank both deputies tonight for coming in and sharing that information with us. Thank you, Councillor James, for putting that case very succinctly. May I ask through you, Mr Mayor, a question of Mrs Olsen? The report, the noise report that was referred to, when did Council actually receive that?
Ms Olsen.
Through you, Mayor. We haven't received it in the planning department as yet, and so we haven't included it in the report. It was.
When would you require that? Not under normal circumstances.
So certainly prior to, we would need time to forward it to the EPA for their advice. So we would need a significant amount of time. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ms.
On that basis, I'd also like to acknowledge the volunteers in the fire brigade because I don't know where we'd be without you. We certainly need you, and I commend the officers on their recommendation, and I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Mulder, thank you, and then Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If my understanding is incorrect, is not incorrect, double negative, that the request was made of the developers for an extension of time to assess this particular noise report. It wasn't received within, the extension wasn't granted, so therefore there was no time to receive it, which hasn't happened, let alone consider it. And as a consequence, we find ourselves in this awkward situation of having to make a decision based on a lack of grant of extension. So as much as, you know, I will make the points that, you know, compare this quarry, which is operated with a backhoe, digging out red gravel and putting it in the back of a truck, compared to blasting at Flagstaff Gully, bluestone blasting at Flagstaff Gully. That's a huge difference in terms of noise, and I have a thing to do it. But of course, we don't have the noise report. We can't consider it, and as such, we have no option but to refuse this. And my message is just quite clear to developers. When they're asked for something like an extension for reasonable grounds, for heaven's sake, give it to the planning staff so that we can so that they can do their job properly and we can do our job properly. But without that report, we have no option, I would argue, but to agree with the officer's recommendation, because the development application is deficient. On a general principle, I must say that given the nature of the quarry operations, the limited hours of use and all the rest of it, and that this is an area that is crying out for development and is the kind of development that we need to keep going on in these particular areas. Not to mention the desperately needed developer contributions towards South School Road, which will never be developed until we will never be able to get up to scratch until such time as we approve these things. But we are where we are, and as much as as I've made the point about encouraging developers to cooperate rather than take us to this point where we've got to be refused, we've got to refuse something on something which I desperately would like to approve and tick forward. But then I'm bound by a planning scheme and I'm bound by due process.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Mulder's actually stolen a lot of my thunder in terms of what I was going to say, which is basically that we may have been able to approve this development on the basis of the noise consultant's report had we had it at the appropriate time, had the planning officers had opportunity to get feedback from the EPA and to consider it in drafting their report. Yeah, once again, I'll reiterate the extension of time would have been a good opportunity to consider that. But the advice we have is that the 42-day timeframe without that extension expires on the 11th of October. We can only make a decision on the basis of the information that's before us and the report and recommendations that are before us. And in terms of those recommendations, I don't believe we can approve this development. I just want to make a little bit of comment about the Sanford Fire Brigade. I'm a former member of the Sanford Fire Brigade. It's a fantastic brigade. They work across a very large area, and it's a very unfortunate situation that the brigade chief actually contacted me when this issue came up, you know, one of the options that the TFS is looking at potentially is rolling them into another brigade, and given where they're situated in the area they cover, that's not an ideal outcome. But my understanding is that this really is, I don't think this is something that we can address through our consideration of this planning application. It's really a matter for the Tasmanian Fire Service. Unfortunately, they'll put in this situation because the Tasmanian Fire Service chose to lease land for a brigade on private land, you know, which caused there to be a bit of a lack of control. I understand that Council has actually worked with the Tasmanian Fire Service to look at trying to find alternative sites. I understand that Council does not have any suitable alternative sites. So it's a sorry state of affairs, I think, that's really been caused by the management of the TFS, and the TFS, I understand, were actually offered the site for sale, but didn't want to accept the the sale price. But just to be absolutely sure in what I'm saying, I would like to just ask Mr Mayor, in terms of this application, is there anything we can do to assist the Sanford Fire Brigade? I think I know the answer, but I'll ask the question just to be absolutely certain.
Thank you, and I'll refer to the CEO.
Thank you. I think in the context of this being a private property matter versus the lease that the Sanford Fire Brigade has, the short answer is no. I do note, though, that we've had previous discussions with the TFS regarding relocation of the Lauderdale Fire Station. We haven't heard anything about that for some time. As to the current state of play in terms of where the TFS sees its sites in the southern area of Clarence, we'd need to get an update from the TFS on those discussions at this point in time.
Thank you. Yeah, but I understand Council has been working with the TFS on that, and I hope we continue to work with them and see if we can find a solution that doesn't result in the situation of the Sanford Brigade being rolled into another brigade, because that coverage is really important, that proximity is really important, and I know that as a former fire volunteer in that brigade. So I hope we can get a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Hugh. Councillor Goyne. Thank you.
Whilst we're talking about stealing thunder, apart from the fact that I wasn't actually a volunteer, Dan's pretty much said everything that I had planned on saying, particularly the importance of the Sanford Fire Station. As someone who borders on the vast bushlands in Sanford and lives in fear of fire every day and sees the great work that the station has provided in managing the situations in our area, I really think it's a very important thing that we continue to work with Council to ensure that the station remains open. So.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor James, right of reply, please.
I seek Council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Colleagues, I'll put the officer's recommendation, that is for refusal, as moved by Councillor James. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Council now concludes its deliberations as the Planning Authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving now on to item 8.1 through to 8.3. There are no matters there. We move on to 8.4, governance. 8.4.1, which is dog management policy of 2021. Consultation on proposed changes to declared areas. There's a recommendation there. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Is there a seconder? Councillor Walker, thank you. Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to the council staff for all their hard work. This is a long time coming, and I know that previous iterations of the council have been working hard on trying to get this through, and I look forward to seeing the result of all the hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Walker.
Look, I think the key word in the whole process is the word right at the top of 8.4.1, dog management policy 2021. Some of that is triggering for some of us around the table, but it's followed by a pretty good word, which is the word consultation on proposed changes to declared areas. So in this concept and with this issue, I think that's the main piece of comfort to have, and it's going to be really important to really work through, I suspect, the South Street Reserve proposal, more so than what's proposed on the boardwalk. I think the boardwalk is some common sense, 15 years in the making, but there will be, I think, some negotiation to be had around this, and it just, again, stresses the need to work on the dog park proposal, which was moved in this chamber some 5 years ago, or what's that, 35 dog years.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Kennedy.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Walker, for reminding us of the angst we went through. Don't touch the dogs. Yeah, I'm just really take comfort in the fact that we have got the on-lead areas still around the boardwalk, because there are a lot of people getting very concerned about that. I love the fact that we're going out to consultation. No doubt we're going to hear a whole lot more from the community on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other colleagues wishing to make comment? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question in relation to the handout on 2 Bellreeve Boardwalk, the proposed declared areas. The restricted area blue and states dogs allowed on leash except if restricted during events. My question is how is it going to be advertised and so on, particularly when we have events on the boardwalk, and except in restricted during those particular events? How are we going to perhaps police that and make sure that if there's adequate signage? Or
Thank
my
you,
question is,
James.
how are we going
Mr
to
Brennan,
handle
are you
it?
able to provide an answer to that, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor. This is consultation first to see whether there's public support for it. Post that, it probably would be through signage, yeah, and through the rangers patrolling.
Thank you, Mr Brennan. Is that all, Councillor James? Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder, thank you.
Thank you, yes. I concur wholeheartedly with Councillor Walker in terms of consultation, just how important it is. But can we say that it should be consultation in the fullest possible terms and not denying the community an opportunity to comment on particular aspects of a consultation, and not try to restrict that open community consultation? Because who doesn't believe in community consultation? And heaven knows someone out there might have a better idea than we managed to dream up.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Gwynne, right of reply.
Just I seek colleague support in the consultation process.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. That is a recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.4.2, community consultation, engage interest in an AFL high performance centre in Clarence. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Chong. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As councillors are aware, the state government is in the development of options phase of the site selection strategy relating to a future AFL high performance centre. And as several potential sites have been identified within Clarence, tonight we're being asked to make a decision about whether or not to engage in community and stakeholder consultation in respect of those potential sites. As is appropriate, local councils undertake activities to make their decision-making processes as open and as representative as possible. And councils do this to build community cohesion and trust, and to involve all sectors of the community in municipal activities. Effective community consultation is a participatory process that underpins genuine community development, and this principle is an important foundation of Council's community engagement policy. It enables communities to have a voice on social, economic and strategic objectives, to articulate their own concerns and identify appropriate responses and solutions. The proposed engagement and consultation plan that has been put forward in respect of the AFL High Performance Centre proposal seeks to provide the Clarence community with an opportunity to provide meaningful feedback to Council. Nothing more, nothing less. The nature of the insights sought from the proposed consultation process are appropriate, and the timing, allocation and engagement method practices have, I believe, not deviated from the usual. There's nothing unusual in the process, nothing new. Online, have your say online, pop-up, session proposals, all of that sort of thing. And I think as a council we can be nimble enough to consult in parallel or in addition to the City Heart Plan, the preliminary draft of which has been attached to your papers tonight. This will enable council, I think, to get ahead of community uncertainty and be upfront with our community about what this process means. And to this end, it is important to note that in this case, community consultation is not to be mistaken for community consent. And the amended motion that has been put forward is a reflection of that understanding, and that's very important. The wording of the motion, the amended motion before us, has been amended to better distinguish between the two concepts, because the line between community consultation and community consent can become blurred in practice. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that the proposed community consultation is in any way merely symbolic, because it isn't. And I don't believe that any councillor or council would want to support any type of disingenuous engagement process where the feedback received is not afforded the respect and careful consideration that's due. But I also know that we will receive a diversity in feedback should this motion be successful, as I'm aware that there's a diversity around this room in respect of some of the commentary that's amongst us, and that's as it should be, because we're talking about areas of significance in Clarence, areas about which we all care, and I expect to see a very strong level of interest should we go out to consultation. And it's in this context of being completely open and clear with the community that the consultation process, I think, we should be welcoming, and we should want to hear what the community has to say. And ultimately, our council, along with other councils, don't forget, who are participating in this process, will be able to provide a written response by the end of November in relation to the state government's site assessment and selection process, to detail what capacity, if any, exists to combine local, regional and state aspirations on this particular question. I acknowledge the comfort that's also been provided by the state government's proposal, the document dated the 26th of September 2023, which states final in-principle support would need to be provided by council for any option that was to be taken forward to the next phase. I think that's pretty clear. That's pretty unequivocal. I do believe it would be very premature for council to oppose a process that simply asks for input on the basis that I've outlined today. So accordingly, I'm seeking the support of colleagues for the amended motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie, for those words. Since this was first proposed by State Growth and ended up in the Mercury, I, and I'm sure everybody here, has had a lot of communication about this. People have talked to me, phoned to me, emailed me, and it varies from why aren't you building it already to don't put anything there at all. Parklands would be absolutely outrageous. I don't even want an AFL high performance centre in Clarence. And everything in the middle of all of those, to be fair. And I guess for me, I'm supporting this recommendation because I think we've consistently said we want to know what people think. This is the way we find out, that we go out and ask people the question, do you want a centre at all? And if so, here's a few possible suggestions of where it could be. Tell us what you think. Not this is what we think we should do and we'll go ahead and do it, but tell us what you think about this as a proposal, and if you agree with the proposal, where do you think it should be? There are no really easy sites. Any site that we might talk about has some issues, and it's a case of weighing those up and seeing what makes the most sense. And I hope that through this consultation process, we'll get better information about whether we should have an AFL high performance centre in Clarence at all, and if so, where it should be.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start by saying that I support an AFL high performance centre in Clarence, in the right location. The former Rosny Golf Course is the wrong location. Therefore, I do not believe that we should include it in the consultation options. It's the wrong location because who in their right mind would choose to build twin ovals on a sloping site when there's flat land available? It's the wrong location because it's in a flood zone, which significantly reduces the land available that's suitable for development. It's the wrong location because the cut and fill required to create two ovals would be hugely expensive and would result in a 10-metre high retaining wall on the creek side of the site. It's the wrong location because the proposal suggests access off Gordons Hill Road, which would be a nightmare. It's the wrong location because our City Heart project envisages using the area that's currently car parks for increased office space and accommodation looking out onto the parklands, not looking out onto a 10-metre high retaining wall. It's the wrong location because the City Heart project envisages developing the parklands into a multi-use green space for the whole community with a wild park, a play park and an arts and culture park where the community can gather for outside events. Have you ever stood in the middle of the parklands? It's a beautiful area of mature gum trees, grassy areas for strolling through nature and listening to the rich bird life. We're so lucky to have this space to breathe in the middle of our city. At a time when we recognise the importance of trees in dealing with carbon capture and the importance of green spaces for mental health, what sort of person can stand in the middle of such a beautiful area and say, what this space really needs is 2 ovals and a pavilion. Let's just destroy all these trees and bird habitat and build something where a small number of people can kick a ball around. So I do not support this motion. I fully support consultation, but let's consult on proposals that are practical, achievable and contribute to our whole community without destroying the places that make Clarence special.
Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Firstly, I fully acknowledge my personal risk appetite when it comes to developing council land, which is really rather conservative. This is because I firmly believe we as council have a duty of care to not only look after the well-being of people, but also to the land we are responsible for managing. The Rosny Parkland site is earmarked in the City Heart Plan to be unique in Clarence. And as densification and surrounding suburbs occur, this parkland will become even more special. Now, I cannot support this motion as it currently stands. As the chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, I have a responsibility to advocate for sustainable practices and to hold the organisation to account in implementing the council-endorsed sustainability strategy. Colleagues, we've seen the proposal and the impact it will have on the proposed Rosny Parklands. May I remind you that it will have significant impacts with the removal of a number of large trees, flow-on effects in regards to hydrology, visual impacts in relation to the public realm, and it will make it difficult to achieve both the planned Tasman Highway Cycleway and the shared use trail along the rivulet. In my view, these impacts contradict what we're trying to achieve with the sustainability strategy. Now, I fully acknowledge the potential economic and social benefits such a training facility will have for our municipality. However, in my view, the Rosny Parklands are off limits. This proposal is a strategic planner's nightmare. You spend 18 months working towards something really positive for the community, which has gained public support, only to have the rug pulled out from underneath you, with a political carrot dangled in front of decision makers. We don't need to jump at this. The City Heart Plan is exceptional. Let's stick with it. This proposal has tested my values as I'm a firm believer in community engagement. However, at the end of the day, community input will bear no weight in my decision to protect the vision for Rosny Parklands. In this instance, my professional experience in land management trumps my desire for community engagement. We know a facility is an opportunity. We can continue to investigate this opportunity in other locations with DSG, regardless of whether we seek community input. I therefore do not support this motion in its current form.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I say from the outset that extensive community consultation has been undertaken insofar as the City Heart Plan is concerned, and over the years this council has spent many thousands of dollars with workshops, liaising, consulting with the public and coming up with what I think is an excellent plan as far as a City Heart is concerned. As early as April, May 2023, it was basically decided that what had happened in relation to consultation and what had occurred at the workshops was the best option for moving forward with the City Heart Plan. It didn't include in the April-May 2023 recap and finalisation of the consultation the proposal for a high performance centre on the on the Rosny Park golf course, or the ex-golf course land. It was never intended during those years of consultation and bringing the public together for that to be processed. And I had the expectation that we were going to make a decision on the City Heart Plan very soon, and therefore we were going to hopefully endorse it. But what's happened now is the City Heart Plan, has been sidelined. It's now been decided to be referred to January, February 2024, and therefore this particular project has gained more notification and information than was ever intended as part of the City Heart project. And substantial funding has gone into this, as countless hours of people participating. The other side of this is that in the motion that's before us, it sort of dwells and refers to a strong understanding of Clarence community views about having a high performance centre. In my opinion, we don't need this. We do not need to go and make a decision on going out to consultation. What it will do, in my opinion, is it will, as part of council's, and I use these terms in inverted commas, worldwide web, that's the Clarence World Wide Web, it will be spread, the net will be spread as fast as possible to all of the football clubs, even to the mainland and AFL and VFL clubs, and will be inundated with requests for support, as would we expect from any of the football and any of the management committees to decide at its best to put in a representation, and therefore it will be gobbling up, I think, any of those comments that will be made by the Clarence residents. We don't need to do this. We don't need... Another thing that needs to be done and said here is we could make a decision. Rather than go out to consultation and being concentrated by other groups, football and other management groups and so on, we could make a decision to say, no, we want to retain the golf, Rosny Park golf lands as what it is. And therefore we can make a decision in relation to that, rather than put it out to consultation. How is it, Mr Mayor, that once we end this consultation, if this gets up, how are we going to decide that it's not a good thing to use the set aside that land for the high performance centre when we're inundated with so many requests for support from areas outside Clarence and beyond? How are we going to say no to that? That's going to be very, very difficult. It's better to nip it in the bud now and not go out to consultation. And hopefully if this motion is lost, then in fact, I believe then that may be the end of it, and therefore DSG and the government may need to look elsewhere for a high performance centre.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Gawain, please, and then Councillor Mulder.
I just want to say that 12 months ago I ran for council to be a voice for the people, and I don't believe that you can have a voice without first having ears, and I think it's important that we listen to what our community has to say.
Thank you, Councillor Gawain. Councillor Mulder, please.
I was tempted to pick up the public so perhaps we should vote for one for you. Mr Mayor, I think we need to get ourselves into focus here. We don't own that land. We do not own the land. We only manage it under a licence from the people who do own that land. If we don't go out to consultation on the landowner's idea, how on earth are we ever going to get the public out there, the landowner, to be aware of the community sentiment? That's why we have to go there. And that's why we have to also, going a fraction further, chuck in some alternatives for the landowner to 'should the community reject this. Now, I fervently, I don't think this is the great spot for it. I don't think it's an appropriate use of the land, but then I don't own it. And this particular landowner is in a much better position than most landowners. They, at the stroke of a pen, can change its zoning to whatever they want it to be. We've seen that happen time and time again in recent times, where state-owned reserves land has been switched to housing land. So please, go out to consultation on the High Performance Centre, include this in the format so that the landowner can get an idea of the community sentiment. And if the community sentiment is for it, right, then so be it. If the community centre is against it, then so be it. At least they will know. At least they will know. And yes, it's on the World Wide Web, but it's the World Wide Web doesn't only go as far as the Northern Territory, it goes to Alaska, if you like. And it's the nature of consultation, but we are capable, by and large, of getting a pretty good handle on who is from Clarence, who has got a vested interest, and who has got some sorts of things. And now comes the crunch. And I'm really pleased that clause D, which is put in there, which for those who've only read the papers, is that any results of this consultation are not binding on Clarence. And I can say now that that's the nature of the beast, because we are not. In fact, the only role we will have this is a potential planning authority down the track should the owner of the land submit a development application, and then the chances are, with the foreshadowed major projects legislation, we will be side players while some planning committee appointed by the state government assesses their own project. If I've ever heard of conflicts of interest, there's one, but anyway, that's the way life is. Please. You know, and when it comes to that, I'm pleased about Division D because, to be quite frank with you, I was appalled to see the Mercury article last week which said that if the community do not support any of the sites, we will not. Well, man should wear his glasses. Then the council will not progress the issue. I'm sorry. I was elected here to represent the community. I have to do what's right in as far as the best I can judge, based partly on the feedback of the community, but also sometimes realising that what the people who are yelling at me want may not be in the best interests of the whole community or the state or the nation. So therefore, you know, I don't like the suggestion, and this is why point D's got in there, to make absolutely clear that we are not bound by that community consultation. If I had my way, point D would say is that we will refer the results of the consultation to the landowner, because that's about as far as we can go with this particular development. So for heaven's sake, don't give the landowner the opportunity of saying, oh, well, we tried to consult the community, but council wouldn't play with us. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and do this because we own the land, we control the planning systems, and we can do it. So please, let's just go and put this thing out to consultation. Let's go and get it, and let's get some feedback, and we will provide those results of that consultation, and we will see where the government takes it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Boyne and Councillor Mulder for bringing us back to the point of the motion. For someone that fought very hard to save Rosny Golf Course, I have a very soft spot for this location, but I want to hear from the community. That's what this motion is about. I want to hear. We have no evidence, we have no idea, other than the people that have contacted us directly so far. We need to go to consultation with this, and I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Darko, thank you.
I would just like to rise to speak to support the excellent points put forward by Councillors Warren and Councillor Hunter particularly, outlining why this location is inappropriate for the development of a high-performance centre. And my argument is that we should not be in the business of going out to consultation for ideas that lack sufficient merit to ever go ahead. I would ask that councils consider that in making their deliberations.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you. Look, simply put, I can't accept the recommendations. The recommendations remain agnostic, values neutral and ambivalent to the opportunity costs of losing the green space. Councillor Warren and indeed Councillor Hunter raised a lot of the challenges posed by the site, and there's not time to go through each and every one of them with the time constraints. But I mean, let's face it, number one with a bullet is it's on the side of a steep hill. The cut and fill required to create 2 ovals is wild. Those ovals would represent the most bariatric terraces in Tasmania's history. Opposing this motion is looking like a minority position. It's not the easy position, and in the short term, it's not the pragmatic position. But it's the right decision, and it's also the fairest decision if you have doubts. The timelines we are told are tight, so if you don't want to muck state growth around, if you don't believe it's right, is there any feedback that's going to change your mind? With this site, through dumb luck more than anything else, we have preserved it. The parklands represent the Central Park of Clarence, a green space juxtaposed against the state's biggest shopping centre. The space will be vital if we are to have any hope of sensibly planning our way through the expected growth in population that we are going to get. Now, we can choose to put our head in the sand and let growth occur via adhocracy through clumsy suburban infill, or tactically within places like the Rosny CBD by facilitating the creation of apartments for convenience, proximity to services and transport, links for workers, as well as options for empty nesters to downsize into. But either way, if that's a style of living that we're going to start offering, there's going to be a need for a quality, substantive green space nearby. And basically, we are signing the death warrant for the parklands tonight. And here's why. Here's the rub. The Rosny Parklands recreational value will grow exponentially over time. But right now, there's very few people to fight for it. Golf finished up a little over 2 years ago. Thousands, no, look, probably the majority of residents in Clarence have never actually been on the site, let alone multiple times and built up an affinity for it. And there's not going to be that many people that are going to go into bat for the site because they don't know what they're losing. And the future generation can't speak on the matter either. We as councillors have a stewardship responsibility for those future users. It would be disingenuous of me to tick off on this process, and a vote for this motion is to state your willingness to entertain turning the parklands into a high-performance centre. This motion is going to succeed by the looks of it, and that is council saying, we're happy to entertain that change. Well, I can't, and I won't. But in opposing the motion, I'm not dismissing a high-performance centre outright. There are a range of social and economic benefits to a municipality of hosting an AFL performance centre. There's the X number of jobs and in the construction site and ongoing. No doubt there'll be a rate component too. But poorly sited, the high performance centre will be a locus of community division and angst, an unwelcome imposition. Properly situated, the high performance centre could be truly transformative over and above any marginal economic benefits. The Tasmanian team will be government owned, or if you prefer, community owned. It's more than just a licence for a 19th team. It's a social licence for a life-changing community development, potentially. The opportunities for role modelling to younger Tasmanians around fitness, right through to issues such as, consent, etc. And there are alternatives. And I'll just name one because time is short. But if we look as an overview, you go along the Clarence Plains Rivulet corridor. There's ample space for an AFL high performance centre. It could be a source of pride and inspiration, and nearby Glebe Hill Village would provide all the amenities to staff and players. It's not that far from town, especially compared to the congestion-loaded travel of the equivalent facilities in Melbourne. So let us work with our community and neighbouring councils to find a location that will not only help our new team kick goals on the paddock, but kick goals in a range of other metrics that can make our community better. Let's not stuff the community or state growth around. I foreshadow my motion if I've managed somehow convince people to come along. But you really need to reflect on that site out there. That's going to be this council's legacy. It's happening right now.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. With the officer's recommendation and the alternate, I am very much on the margins because I do sympathise with colleagues who say that the Rosny Parkland site is inappropriate. And one of the big concerns I have with the Rosny Parkland site being considered is the opportunity costs. Whatever we do with that site, it's something that would last for generations, and there's a big potential to have a fantastic public open space in an area that, our city heart that doesn't necessarily have enough public open space that could complement our city, complement the experience of people who go to the commercial centre for shopping or other activities. So I see that potential. But having said that, the High Performance Centre is also an incredible opportunity for our city in terms of economic benefits, in terms of social benefits. The ideal outcome, I think, would be if we realise that potential on another site. I am actually surprised that the department would want to proceed with that site given the topographical challenges it presents, but I guess they have a view that those challenges can be overcome. But an opportunity of this magnitude is not something that I think we should reject outright because it would be so easy for our community, the people we represent, to accuse council of being closed-minded. Like I said, I'm leaning towards saying that I don't believe Rosny Parklands is appropriate, and that's what I may land on when it comes to the ultimate decision. But I want to keep an open mind, and I want to hear the feedback from our community before I land on that. Now, Councillor James sort of asked the question, well, if we have this incredible weight of submissions and public opinion that's in favour of the High Performance Centre in Rosny, then how can we possibly reject that? And my answer is that I will take the same approach to considering that community consultation that I do when it comes to any consultation process. Because the way I see it, unless you conduct a very robust process that gets a true snapshot of the overall community sentiment, you have this issue in community consultation of selection bias. What a lot of loud voices say in favour or against a proposal is not necessarily representative of the entire community. And to me, the value in community consultation is in quality, not quantity. What I want to hear are the arguments in terms of, well, what are the benefits of the proposal? What are the opportunity costs? What are the other costs? And how those are all weighed up. And this is the same approach I took in relation to when we had the consultation over the Shambrook proposal at Kangaroo Bay, where we had 85% of people participating in that consultation being of one view. But to me, the question was, I ended up going with the 15% because to me the question was, well, what is the benefit to the community rather than what do the people putting in the submissions see as the benefit? And I looked at the quality of the arguments that were put forward rather than, what was the weight of opinion for those who made a submission. So the community consultation process to me is about, are there any arguments out there that can convince me that the benefits of the High Performance Centre in Rosny Parklands outweigh those costs that I have not considered myself, because I don't believe we as councillors necessarily hold all the wisdom. There is a lot of wisdom out in the community that we can potentially tap into, and I want to hear those voices and those arguments before I go ahead and make a decision on this But like I said, my initial thinking is that there are other potential uses of the Rosny Parklands in terms of what came through the City Heart Plan that could have a much broader public benefit for a lot more people. That's probably where I'm going to land at the end of the consultation, but I'm still open to having the consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Colleagues, thank you all for your contributions. Before I ask or invite the Deputy Mayor for her right of reply, I'll hand the chair over to her and just make the point that from my perspective, we're all here as elected members representing our community here in Clarence. And in my view, this is how we best serve the community, letting them have their say on the issues that impact them. We have an obligation to hear what the people of Clarence want and use this information to guide and inform our decision-making process. Providing opportunities for community consultation only increases Council's transparency with the community and it builds trust. And in my view, this is the right approach. Now, if we've learned anything from significant development proposals that have come before this chamber in recent years, it is the importance of us getting in front of the ball to openly, transparently, honestly and professionally engage with our community. As we have discussed, if the people of Clarence decide they are happy for a high performance centre to be located in the Rosny Parklands, the site of the former Rosny Public Golf Course, this doesn't lock Council into having it built there. It simply gives us licence for deeper exploration of that option. Colleagues, the home of AFL and AFLW in our city presents both a significant opportunity and decision for Clarence and its people. From my perspective, the people of Clarence are owed the right to provide feedback and influence on a decision that will impact generations to come. As such, I urge colleagues to support this motion. I'll take the chair back and call on the Deputy Mayor for her right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank colleagues for their contributions to the debate. And as I said in my opening remarks, and unsurprisingly, I acknowledged that there would be a diversity of views around the chamber this evening, some wanting to see something, some absolutely opposed to ever seeing anything there. And of course, some people in between saying, appropriately, let's wait and see. But now is not the time for that debate. With respect, it isn't. And with respect, this is not the death knell for the Rosny Parklands. And in fact, I reject that assertion outright. Actually found a little bit offensive personally, given my strong history and track record of protecting special places in this city. So absolutely not, but I'm never afraid to test my views in the community, regardless of where I stand on things. And it seems to me that there's a little bit of fear at the moment, a little bit of scaremongering about what this might mean. And in fact, really all we're trying to do is go out and test the ideas that might be forthcoming from our community. If I thought that there was anything else at stake here, then I would share the concerns that other people have around the future of a range of spaces in our city. But that's simply not what we're doing. And I have to say, when the consultation process has taken place for City Heart, did we exclude people from commenting on the parklands then? Because that was going to be the death knell? I don't think that we did, as far as my reading goes. We allowed people to talk about the parklands then, and that process is not complete. So I don't see why that this shouldn't be able to be inserted into that process, and I think it's a very unhealthy thing to do, to suddenly decide what people may and may not be able to have a voice on partway through a process that we're already going through. And I did take the time to go and have a look at the numbers. People have raised the issue of being inundated with comments. The numbers from just for example, the survey replies that we got from City Heart in 2020, 22, 23, 189, 265 and 159 over those three phases were the survey responses. The emails, or written submissions, were 8 and 7. Now, we've formulated some pretty fantastic work, But that just goes to show, as Councillor Hume was saying, it's not always about quantity. Quality is also equally important, and we'd be looking for all of those things that might come back through from our community. But nothing will come back if we don't give people the opportunity to actually have a say. We'll be assessing nothing. So that's a real concern to me. I don't think it's appropriate to rule in and rule out what people can have a say on in our community. I don't share the view that this is the death knell of anything. Certainly, I seek support.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. So the motion before the chair is the amended recommendation, A through to D, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Chong. I'll put that amended recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 9, there are no motions on notice. On to item 10, 10.1, there are no questions on notice, nor are there any answers to questions on notice. 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting as listed in the agenda. Moving on to 10.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening with Councillor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Excuse me, sorry, Councillor Goyne, would you? No, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Warren. Councillor Darko. Thanks, Councillor Darko.
Just noting the progress of Pindos Park with a lot of excitement there. I was wondering if we could have an answer for those constituents who were interested in basketball facilities at the site. When would be the appropriate time for that avenue to be explored, and what might that look like?
Sure, thank you. Mr Graham, please.
Through Mr Mayor, I think our previous advisors will consider that through the open space strategy. So we're in development of that, which will come to council in the new year. But it's also waiting for after all the work's finished to reassess how the site is actually being used by the community and what is available there as well. So I'd need to actually find out what the expected construction timeframe is and can inform councillors of that.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Darko, Councillor Goyne.
This is more a question from a member of the public. I know we discussed the pontoon in Lauderdale. If the community itself was to purchase a pontoon for the Lauderdale Bay, what steps would they need to take to have it moored in the bay itself? Is that something to be approved by council or the mast?
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. That raises a whole host of complicated questions regarding ownership, risk and liability, but the issue around where it would be sited would ultimately be an issue for mast as well. So we can have a look at that and provide some further information, but it certainly wouldn't be our preferred way to approach this. Raises a whole range of complicated issues.
Second question, Councillor Goyne.
The question, the answer, but has to be asked. My second question is: do we normally have lighting at public toilets in Clarence? Is that sort of something that is generally a safety measure? I believe that the toilets Bella Eve at the Blunston end don't actually have lighting, and that the LED floodlight on the barbecue area has been blown for a considerably long period of time.
Thank you. Is that Mr Brennan or Mr Graham? Mr Graham, please.
I'll follow up on those items and advise.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Now, at the 22nd of November 2021 meeting of Council, I moved a notice of motion and was grateful to have Alderman Kennedy second it and be passed unanimously. And that was in relation to the Tracks and Trails Advisory Committee representation, that Council expand the membership of Tracks and Trails Committee to include a representative from a recognised dog walkers group and authorise amendment of the Tracks and Trails Constitution to reflect this change. Can you confirm that the reconstituted Tracks and Trails Committee has a member from a representative and recognised dog walking group? I won't necessarily ask you to name that person now, but I would seek confirmation that that is the case, and at some point after the meeting I would appreciate if you could furnish me with the name of who that representative is.
Before I call on the CEO, Councillor Walker, please take your seat. There has been some issues with reconstitution of the Tracks and Trails Committee. There's been several attempts to have that committee meet. That hasn't been possible. I've received correspondence today advising me that that we will be discussions had in the very near future, if not this evening, to try to ensure that that does occur, because I've been contacted by members of the community like you who are concerned that it hasn't met for nearly 12 months now, and even though this council's made a decision to put in place that committee, it for a number of reasons has not yet been able to meet. So I'll just mention that for your benefit and the benefit of everyone, that there hasn't, it has been not through the lack of will on the part of council officers that this committee hasn't met for 12 months. So, CEO, do you have anything to add to that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for reminding me of that council decision back in November, was it 2021? I think the short answer, well, I'll take it on notice. The short answer, I think, at this point in time, subject to any further information I have, is the Tracks and Trails Committee was for want of a better term, abandoned and reconstituted as a working group. I can't recall off the top of my head whether that working group has its own constitution or set of operating rules. But those would have been through an approval process if they are, and it may be that that particular requirement wasn't picked up in the new rules. So if it hasn't been, it's an oversight. It can be addressed, but it certainly isn't a premeditated view that's been taken by officers, if that gives you any comfort.
Such inference was being made, but certainly hoping to get to the bottom of that. The second thing I want to raise is not a rhetorical hooray for Landcare, although the Landcare groups do a significant work for our community, and I'm really pleased to be part of one. Of concern, I've received correspondence, and it's this correspondence been handed to me not from my group in Limekiln, which is meeting on Saturday, but from another one, that there seems to be some changes with the grant opportunities. Now, a lot of Landcare groups, in fact I'd say the bulk of them, the funding they get is to maintain the good work they've done and to preserve, if you like, the care that they have already provided and not let it stay into a state of disrepair. So I have some concern around, and I'd like some comfort around this, that there's been a note that there's going to be further information regarding application for grants in February next year, and that the program is designed to fund specific projects within the council area aimed at enhancing our natural values. Please note that the grants for maintenance of previous projects or ongoing sites will not be eligible under the new program. Can you confirm that's the case? Because I find that a little bit concerning that we might have Landcare groups potentially disbanding or at least getting disillusioned.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. CEO, please.
Thank you. I'll need to take that one on notice, but it would be of assistance if you can share that correspondence with us so we know specifically what the concern is that we are responding to. I put it in that context because we have, as Council knows, gone through a process to reform our grants and sponsorship processes under a policy and other structural change framework. So I can't answer specifically off the top of my head, but we can certainly give you a detailed answer that may indicate, you know, how those groups can access that funding. Or if there is an issue, it'll flush it out and we can then at least talk about what the issue is and how it might be addressed.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor James, do you have any questions?
Yes, thanks. May I say from the outset, Mr Mayor, that I am the chair of Tracks and Trails, and we will be convening a meeting very soon. It hasn't been as a result of any decision that's been made by the executive in relation to that, so I thought I'd mention that in the state.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah. First question is in relation to the shopping trolleys that seem to be left ad hoc on our main streets, particularly in Bligh Street, and there's been a number of representations made to me, and I'm sure everybody else is aware of this. And it seems as though, Mr Mayor, that Coles and Woolworths should have and may have some responsibility in trying to do this. So my question is, does council, given it's on its own land where these trolleys have been left, and given that in the circumstance a lot of people are going without and having no means to actually get their goods to their properties in the close proximity, is it possible for council to approach Coles and Woolworths or these major companies, and I'm talking about not necessarily at Eastlands, but there are other places within the city, to either draw those supermarket chains to the attention that they do have some responsibility, and these trolleys are being left on council land and may cause some hazard, particularly to pedestrians, and if some of these trolleys sort of roll onto passing traffic, etc. So that's the question. Perhaps I could have some indication from the...
Before I call on the CA, you'd be aware of, from media reports, the Glenorchy City Councillor's trial dealing with the two major chains with some success, according to Mayor Thomas. I've had this discussion with her, but CA, would you like to add to that, please?
No, thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, I can't add much more to it other than they are the property of the relevant supermarket chain, and it's their obligation to collect them. What I'm unsure of at the moment is what their arrangements are for notification of trolleys and collection. So we'll take it on notice, we'll find out exactly what those arrangements are and provide briefing accordingly.
Do you have a second question, Councillor?
Second question is, and I've spoken to Mr Graham prior to the meeting to give him some indication of the question I'm going to ask, and that is that Cluny Close has been scheduled over the last 2 years for a major upgrade. That is the roadworks, curb and guttering, etc., and a substantial amount of funds have been set aside for those works. Mr Graham, could he advise council on the current state of play, when works will commence, or whether there's been a change in some of the roadworks which may require additional funding in the upcoming budget?
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Graham, please.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll just need to correction on a few items in relation to that. There are sections of the footpath on Cluny Close which are due for replacement. But due to the steepness of the road, a like-for-like replacement and bitumen is probably not the best long-term strategy for the street. If we do choose to go with concrete, then it's best to replace the curb and gutter at the same time, but this involves some complexities in terms of then with the East Derwent Highway intersection, which would need then curb ramps, and also dealing with the Department of State growth of a concrete footpath through there, and there's a lot of services and surface pits at this location. So, and if it was decided to go with concrete, then it's a specific design project which is required rather than it's a simple footpath replacement program. So council officers are undertaking their assessment of this street at the moment in terms of its best long-term strategy, and we'll inform councillors of our after we've completed this assessment.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Could we please have an update on the progress of the development of the economic development strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Ms Wicks, please.
I'll have to take that one on notice and provide an update next council meeting.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Second question, Councillor Hume.
Related to the first question, I was wondering if it could be confirmed that my understanding is there's also some work going on as part of that on a progress report on the 2016 to 2021 economic development plan.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Ms Wicks.
Through you, Mayor. Again, I'll take that one on notice and provide an update.
Great, thank you. Maybe in the weekly briefing report of this week. Thank you very much. Councillor Hunter.
I presume you'll need to take this on notice. My question is whether there's been a development application, most likely approved previously, for the large property on the corner of Raffle Range Road and South Arm Highway.
Ms Olsen, are you in a position to answer that?
I'm going to have to take that one on notice. Thank you.
Councillor Hunter, is that? That's it. Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
The notice is being dominated by notice of questions. And I suspect mine will fall the same thing. Residents in Howrah, the Howrah Gardens area, particularly those around Fermoy Crescent, have been complaining for some time about a lack of water pressure in that particular area. As a brand new subdivision, this is somewhat appalling. Yet I noticed that there was I believe there's a new reservoir has been constructed at the top end of Roybridge Road. Has that reservoir been commissioned? If so, or, if not, will that resolve the water pressure problems? If so, what is TasWater's intentions in regard to actually lifting up or raising the water pressure to a level where it's actually usable and people can actually, the washing machine can actually fill up?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Mr Graham, are you in a position to provide an answer? We're taking this one on notice.
We'll contact TasWater and take this one on notice and advice.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder, second question. Deputy Mayor. No, thank you. Well, colleagues, before we move or seek a motion to move into closed meeting, can I just remind colleagues there's been a bit of latitude this evening by the Chair, but as with public question times, councillor question times also, it's important that as per the rules, all questions and answers must be kept as brief as possible. I appreciate that times preamble is necessary, but just make the point that in my opinion I provided a bit of latitude this evening, and I won't be continuing that into future meetings, but I am conscious it's only 9:10, so it's a bit of an early night. So I'll call for a motion now to move into closed meeting. A mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Hume. Seconded, Councillor Chong. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. So thank you to those members of the public who have attended this evening in person and those that joined us via live stream from home. We look forward to seeing you here again in 3 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Please end the feed. We're clear? Excellent. Thank you. All right. So, colleagues, going into 11.1 application.